Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is December 4, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Honor and play. Oliver, I forgot to ask you, how do you pronounce your last name? Please tell me.
Trager.
Oliver Trager. What an honor and a pleasure. I am so thrilled. Where in the heck you calling in from?
Albany, California, where I've recently relocated.
Albany, CA. All right. First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Other than the obvious food, water, and shelter, I guess I would say laughter.
Oh my God, I love that answer. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Radio.
Wow, I am a radio person. Is that cool? Radio has not disappeared.
Baseball on the radio, really, life does not get much better than that.
We don't need no stinking stadium or TV. Radio does the trick. What an art form.
The Mets have this fantastic radio announcer, Howie Rose. And, he's a New York Jew. He's more your age than my age. So we have a lot of, overlapping New York sports experience. And so when he broadcasts a game, it's full of references and in-jokes that only if you grew up during that time and space that you would get. He doesn't explain it like an artist, he implies it. And it's just an incredibly rich experience, not to mention his passion and strategic knowledge of the game and all of that. I don't know what I would do with my summers if he didn't exist.
How cool. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Wow, that's a good one. Instinctual survival.
Yeah. But you're implying the answer to the next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
Innate is my first gut reaction.
Fill in the blank, Oliver. I don't know what I think until I
say it 5 different ways and 5 different times.
Nice. Well, I got it from McLuhan. I don't know what I think until I say it.
Yeah.
Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. But for yours to say 5 different times, that's the key.
Well, it could be 6, it could be 4. I just picked 5. But
give me a high five. Can humans think without language?
Oh, well, I would say, yeah, because there are probably people who don't have language or have at least a verbal language. Maybe they have a visual language, and maybe they think in visual terms.
Yeah. Well, Chomsky says that a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
I take a deep breath.
Thank God. You're like the guy he said a couple of weeks ago, he said, group hug.
There you go.
But taking a deep breath is such an amazing thing. And what you're saying is you take a conscious breath.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, what you imply with your question is a conversation in which there's conflict of some sort.
Yeah.
So language is breaking down, and we're having a failure to communicate, as the warden said in Cool Hand Luke.
Yeah.
And at those times, whether it's taking a breath or backing away or removing yourself from the the verbal fray and conflict, to regroup, to better express yourself is probably the best course of action. I mean, I can't say that I'm always like uh, innocent
Yeah.
of going too far when things break down and making things worse. I mean, we're human beings, we screw up,
Yeah.
and I'm exhibit A.
Do you think humans are more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Feeling, but I have
Two
nothing to base that on other than a feeling.
Yeah, no, that's what 80% of people say, feeling. These are 2 questions from Alan Turing in 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
You go deep, Jerry. Uh, is thinking a function of the soul? I don't know. That's only I can only say I don't know.
That,
Is
and you gotta feel comfortable. That's totally legit to say, "I don't know." I'm not trying to put you on the spot, and you can even say, "I won't answer that question." It's really, Oliver, it's me and you versus the questions and the wording on them. So don't feel I'm trying to put you on the spot and saying, "I don't know" is valid.
no, it's
Thank you.
okay. I don't know. Those 3 words are my kind of default. That's my
Yeah,
default sentence to
no,
almost everything.
that's fine. The second Turing question is,
'Cause, I
can
mean,
machine
'cause most, and most questions, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, that's alright. And then all these are just jumping off points to talk. So the
Sure.
next Turing question is, can machines think?
It seems like more and more they're able to,
Yeah,
but I'm not sure I would characterize it in the way that maybe we normally define as thinking.
thinking. Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Meaning. But meaning
Yeah.
and happiness can be connected too.
Yeah.
If you get happiness through pursuing meaning, then you're also pursuing happiness.
Yeah, because I got it from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He says, meaning usually lasts, happiness doesn't necessarily last.
I'm not a big fan of happy.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I don't enjoy happiness,
Yeah.
but like there's that old Chinese saying, like the mind is a monkey. I mean, you can feel happy one minute and feel pretty screwed up the next. So it's a fleeting feeling, emotion. I don't get too hung up on happiness or sadness. It's all gonna pass
Yep.
one way or the other and be back again before you know it.
Love it. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
I think we're detecting it. But again, that's an instinct answer.
Yeah, well, that's what I want. Instinct, impulse, intuition. Like Lily Tomlin says, reality's just a collective hunch. I'm just after your hunch on a lot of these.
Right.
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
How about speed of love?
Oh my God. See, this is where you reinvent the questions. I love that. Um, Audre Lorde, the poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer responded to her and said, "You can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?"
Well, it's not a it's I wouldn't suggest a new tool, but I would suggest a forgotten, underutilized tool is humor.
Yeah, it's good. I love when I get that because again, you don't, because I said new, you knew immediately. You could put it into the context. It's not used enough. We
But
need more.
yeah, I have some friends who are involved with uh anti-Trump stuff, shall we say. I don't want to name their name just because,
Yeah.
you know, and a lot of their actions, while I find provocative, I don't find humorous, in a
Yeah.
way that would like poke the beast, in a way that would enlighten. It just seems confrontational and yeah, 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 like scolding.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that that's the way to, influence quote unquote enemies.
Yep. Yeah, you're anticipating a lot we're gonna get into. But on the just
Like,
going along
about
with
the hippies, like that's what made Abby Hoffman such a vital figure, as problematic as a person as he may have been, is throwing all that money onto the floor of the stock exchange. I mean, that's the kind of thing I would like to see. It's a way of giving the finger without giving the finger.
dude, totally. You have ESP because I was about to say as in Abby Hoffman, then I didn't. And the second I didn't, you threw in his name. It was like perfect timing because he admitted he got his shit from McLuhan, and McLuhan is a jokester. And Abby always had that great sense of humor going. Like, don't take your shit so serious, but we can be effective by doing things. And he was effective.
The trickster, has a long history in global folklore, and
Yep.
that trickster's there for a reason.
Exactly. Coyote. So what new toy do you suggest?
New toy.
Yeah.
Um, wow, a toy. Well, I've been playing around with it's not a new toy, but pencils are fun.
Oh my God. I love pencils. Look at this. Pencils are a great toy.
And I wonder, like, has anybody ever done a documentary on the number two pencil? It just seems like a natural. Like, what's up with the number two pencil?
Look at that.
Oh,
Number two pencil right there, right at my side. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I don't really worry, but I'm always concerned with my family.
Yeah. Family's important. So McLuhan learned from a poet that artists are the antenna of a race. They're like radar, distant early warning system. In artists, I mean musicians, poets, painters, they're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we might be able to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So, Oliver, I asked you the question McLuhan probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, I gotta parse that one out a little bit. Break it down a little bit more for me, can
It's
you?
sort of like, we just we just embrace Zoom. I'm like, we're Zoomers. And it's really a useful tool. You didn't have to drive. I didn't have to set up a tape machine. We hit one button in the interviews on live TV worldwide, and then it's on YouTube forever. And it's like so easy. So Zoom has certain effects made interviewing a lot easier, but there's certain psychic deeper effects it has, like we're more intimate. Like if me and you were in a room like I used to do my interviews, or you've done interviews, the person isn't staring at your face. They
Mhm.
look at you, but they're looking at the room or turning their head. And this is an amazing hidden psychic effect of Zoom, is that it makes conversation more intimate and more focused. So
It does.
that's a hidden psychic effect. So then how do we expose or understand those hidden psychic effects so that we can learn? Because a lot of people go, oh, that's horrible. They go, I can't wait till you do these events live again. I goes, I'm never going to do events live again. I mean, I'll do a few, but it's like stupid. I'm too old. I'm not going to drive people. I don't have to set up folding chairs. So this is all like, the services and disservices of Zoom for the instant of the hidden psychic effects, that it affects us deeper than the obvious. And artists tend to give us, like Abby Hoffman, to expose the hidden psychic effects of money by throwing it over, a bunch of money hounds on the stock market. So what?
Well, I mean, in a way, we're talking about technology and its interface with human experience, I suppose, in some
That's
way.
true, but keep in mind when you say technology, it doesn't have to be a, a tangible thing. Like Zoom is tangible in a way. We have these computers, but spoken word is, you don't hold it in your hand, and we invented that.
No, after
Print.
you say it, it's gone.
Yeah,
But
and there's things that are like, we invented religion, we invented philosophy. There's things that we invent that also have hidden psychic effects, in that artists tend to expose these effects, how it changes our behavior. But in the long run, humans in general ignore these sort of radar, or this antenna broadcast from artists. And the question is why do humans ignore, more like your three big ones? The Dead, Dylan, and Lord Buckley broadcast a lot of hidden psychic effects to us, but people tend to ignore them.
is it ignoring, or is it just not absorbing, maybe?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's another good word. Why do we not absorb them?
we live in a very quick uh, cultural environment.
Yeah,
People want instant gratification. And I think the more we've sort of been trained by technology or the acceleration of apocalypse to take in and discard rapidly.
yeah,
I mean, just to put it in technology context, I mean, fire is a kind of technology. All technology is a double-edged sword. I mean, fire can cook you a great steak, or it can burn your village down, right? But we tend to ignore the negative consequences that technology will bring us at our own peril, and at our own benefit too.
benefit, right? And that's really what we're trying to do, is suss out both the services and disservices. Do artists have moral obligation?
I'm always a little bit loath to say what art is or what artists should do, but my own personal feeling for what I do, the answer would be yes.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Well, a friend of mine likes to say change is bad, so I guess that applies to both of those.
That's good. Change is bad. I like that.
I think, well, I mean, ask me the question again.
Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I guess I'm more afraid of old ideas.
Yeah.
Since we seem to be operating with a lot of old ideas, seem not to be serving humanity well, and new ideas, while they need to be tested, I suppose, are refreshing to me.
Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
I have a fantastic memory. I'm known among my friends as kind of the community bard of sorts. So my memories are deep and go way back. But yeah, my earliest memory is I'm walking down the street with my mom in the Upper East Side, where I grew up in New York City. It was a very windy day, probably in March, and I had a little hat, and the wind like took my hat and like blew it way, way up in the air. And we went kind of chasing after it for like a half a block, and we got close to it, and the wind blew it again, and it blew up again, and it was this. In my mind, it's very dreamy memory, but I've asked I asked my mom about it the other day, and she said, "Oh yeah, I remember that definitely.
Wow.
The hat
Do you
blowing up in the air,
That's really well described. Um, I've really pictured it. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
a blessing."
Yeah. Oliver, tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
Well, I'm blessed with having a really amazing, tight, fun, vibrant, intellectually alive family. And I could pick any one of them, but I really got to go with my dad, since he was a writer as well as myself. Uh, a bit of a rock on tour, a bit of a mansplainer too, I would add. But uh, he his discipline and vision and stick to itiveness paid off for him in the long run. Uh, I mean, briefly, he was in advertising where he met my mom back in the 50s and 60s when uh, my parents split up, and he was not in the best of health. He devoted himself to writing books, first about food and food history, but his magnum opus was a book called The People's Chronology. It's a year by year account of human history uh, with little um, paragraph bites, so to speak. It's not like a history book exactly. It's every year by year, every year is separated by a series organized within a series of symbols like war, the arts,
Yeah.
technology, etc. I don't get too deep into his book, but he was obsessed with it, and I think that obsession for knowledge and putting it into a package filtered down to me, and my encyclopedias, certainly my dogged research with the Buckley Project, all came from his model. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Now, outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you.
Um, my I guess the first person that comes to my mind, there's a few people come to my mind, but one in particular was a performance artist named Stephen Ben Israel. He was
Uh-huh.
a member of the Living Theater, and he was a big Lord Buckley acolyte of sorts, but a fantastic storyteller and writer and performance artist himself. And he uh, befriended me, took me under his wing, and really gave me a lot of insight and courage in terms of beginning to perform myself. I would not be doing, I'm not sure I would be doing any of my performance stuff if I had not encountered this amazing person.
So you implied it, but did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, Jewish by culture, but we celebrated Easter and Christmas. Growing up, we were. I didn't go to my first um, Passover Seder until I was probably 14 or something.
Yeah.
We were definitely like it was made known that we were Jews, but I
Yeah.
had no real connection with any part of it. I was bar mitzvahed at the Wailing Wall when I was 27. I mean, that's another story, but
Wow.
uh,
Oliver, do you pray?
yeah.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Um, I'm trying to think of a one-liner here. I guess you had to be there. I don't know.
I guess you had to be. Yeah, one guy said, We checked the records. We're sending you back. We made a mistake.
Yeah. Like, I guess actually, that's a you gotta be that that's a punchline to another joke, but I guess I
Yeah,
would say, like, I guess I would, like, if God it is funny you should bring God up because it's a part of my Buckley show, but, uh, I would I think I would like to hear, "You did an okay job."
yeah, yeah,
That was a decent run, there was some big screw ups there, but, on the whole, you did okay.
yeah. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I would maybe rethink it or rephrase it as, evil people are made, not born.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all capable. But how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up with a few modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question, Oliver, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
That I agree with. But I also said I don't really know if I have or have ever really had any enemies in my life. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe I have and I didn't know. I think there are people who probably have not liked me.
Yeah.
That's a different subject. But I when I am around folks who give me the heebie-jeebies one way or the other, I just kind of remove myself from the situation.
Yeah.
Life is way too short to get close to darkness.
It's really good. I love these words. You're a wordsmith. Heebie jeebies. What a great two words. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Um, Life hardens us, and the arts and nature both humanize us.
Yeah, it's really good. The arts humanize us and nature. You're actually sort of implying there's a difference between arts and nature.
Um, well, I suppose you could say there is and there isn't. There is because the natural world would exist without human beings, right? On the other hand, human beings are a part of nature, and so whatever we produce, in a way, could be construed as an expression of nature.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
what
guess
do you
I guess that's why I separate them on some level.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting because the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. But, what do you think the motive of the cave artist was?
Um, I think it's not that much different from the artist today, processing a chaotic world into um, a tangible construction.
Yeah, it's good.
We seem that we live in a dangerous, chaotic, short, brutal, and nasty, or whatever Hobbes said, uh, existence, and whether it's paintings on the cave wall or a story or a movie or music, it creates an order for us to adhere to, that gives comfort and grounding and solace
Yeah,
and
it's really,
inspiration.
really well put, Oliver. Thank you. So tell me that you sort of implied it, but tell me the tipping point when you decided your career as a writer. I mean, your dad's writing, you see his encyclopedic research mind working.
Mhm.
And what did you go to college? And then that's what I'm going to do.
Well, I started writing, I guess I got serious about it around when I was in 8th grade or so, um, when I realized you could be a sports writer. Because I was a huge sports fan when I was a kid. That was much more my thing than the arts as a youngster. I mentioned baseball before, but sports in general, I was totally, totally crazy for. Now, not so much to me. All the great interesting sports stories are happening off the field. Um, we went when I was in high school. We went to I went to this kind of funky hippie high school in the village, Greenwich Village, and a lot of the school curriculum was based around uh, um, trips around the city. And we had an inn at the New York Times and had a big tour of the New York Times. And they took us to the sports desk, and it began to click on me. Oh, you could like go to the games and write about them. And I'd already begun writing sports stories just kind of for the fun of it. So I began as a long-term high school project. Every game I would go to or even watch on television, I would write a little newspaper style article about, and I would cut the clippings out of the paper the next day and read them. And I just sort of taught myself that craft. But it got me into the habit of writing 200 words every day. And I was writing about baseball, basketball, football, hockey, track, boxing, horse racing, you name it. So, um, uh, and of course, reading a lot of sports literature along the way. So that whole discipline of and focus of being connected to a subject, reading and studying it, reading and writing about it, like you would anything else.
Yeah.
And as I suppose in my hippie high school was very arty milieu there. They're showing us films and taking us to plays and musical performances. And let's face it, like the beautiful girls at school were all into that stuff. So you wanted to, that was a way to connect with them. Um, uh, and that all began to take a life of its own for me, and it gradually and eventually supersede my interest in sports writing, and that really led to a love and embrace of literature. You mentioned Joyce and Faulkner. I mean, they were two of my early um, entry points into you know fine literature, high literature, whatever you want to call it. And then, of course, getting into Shakespeare or Greek mythology and the classics. You asked about college. I went to Bennington College in southern Vermont, a renowned art school, and the milieu there was unbelievable. The professors and the students both heavily involved with with the creative process. And there was a big jazz scene at Bennington. It was called the Black Music Department. Musicians like Bill Dixon and Milford Graves were writing point there. But the literature department was amazing as well. Claude Fredericks, Ben Bellet, who was one of the great translators of Neruda. The philosophy department, Camille Paglia was there, Stephen Harris. I mean, you were just around all these very high level, provocative thinkers and professors who challenged you and got the best out of you and kind of drew a line in the sand or made you jump through all kinds of hoops. And it just um, uh, propelled me into a deeper embrace of the arts in all their forms as I matriculated. uh, through a rather scenic route, I should say too. I took after a couple of years, I bailed from college and hung out in a kind of an edgy hippie commune in Cambridge, Massachusetts, centered around a novelist named a former novelist named H.L. Humes, better known as Doc Humes. And Doc was a kind of, maybe along with his fellow Steve Ben Israel I mentioned before, a huge influence on my life and thinking at the time. I even had to begin to describe like what that scene was like. Let's just say there was a lot of LSD, massage, acupressure massage, and radical politics involved with this group. And it was not for the faint of heart. I eventually bailed from that, went to Columbia University for a year, and then back to Bennington to finish off, where I wrote my thesis on Pynchon.
Really? On Pynchon? How cool. You really summarized it well. And you brought this up, Oliver. A screenwriting teacher, in a way, you touched on this. A screenwriting teacher told me great art, great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
Um, I guess I guess I would cop to both of those philosophies in some ways. I would say I would say that it plays um, a strong role both in the process and, in my general intent. As in my performances anyway. I really want to get my audiences high. Can't
Yeah.
say any simpler than that. I want to elevate them.
Yeah.
So if I'm to that extent, yeah, I'm going there with that goal in mind. I want to bring them out of where they are, and like not to make them forget their troubles, but exalt their spirit.
Yeah. Well, that you anticipate the next question, and I'll ask it anyways and add something is Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your audience when you're creating your art? Not when you're performing in front of the audience, when you're writing it or creating it.
They're a little bit hard to separate. But I would say I'm thinking of them. I will say that,
Yeah.
but I'm also looking to please myself,
Yeah.
with the idea, not as a selfish act, but as a figuring like, well, if I'm getting off on it, maybe somebody else will too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's simple as
Well,
that. I just want to loop back a little bit too to like my misspent late teens and early 20s. Um, having been in school, even in a kind of a hippie school and like, a way out art school like Bennington, I was hungering for life experience. I didn't want to just be in a classroom and learning how to write a paper, which I did not learn how to do in high school. I wanted to get out there in the world and like get my hands dirty a little bit. I mean, I grew up, I wouldn't say I grew up I wouldn't say I grew up in a sheltered environment exactly. I grew up in a very privileged environment, but with a lot of laissez-faire parents who basically like, as long as I called at midnight and told them that I was that I was okay, basically things were cool. So a lot of that, those, like the experience with Doc Humes, or like, I hitchhiked and hopped freight trains cross country a few times. Those were all like following the Kerouacian Cassidy ghost and just like getting on the bus and, seeing
yep.
what the hell happened, wherever the chips fell.
Yeah. That was good. And then let's go back to just performing. Ruth Draper says the key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. Sounds really good, but how do you do that?
Well, first of all, I want to say I love Ruth Draper so much. She was
Oh, no.
amazing.
Amazing.
It doesn't, you know, she if there was somebody who maybe did that whole painting the word picture better than Lord Buckley, it was her.
Yeah.
I mean, and to mention also, like, I still feel that she is really criminally under acknowledged. I mean, if
Yeah.
Lord Buckley has gotten some bit of a profile through my work and the work of others I've been connected to over the years, that's great. But Ruth, nobody knows who the hell
No.
Ruth Taylor
Yeah.
is, and she was I just cannot say enough about how much I dig her work.
Yeah.
Um, that being said, um, audiences feed me. I totally feed off their energy.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm giving them something to feed off of. But when I get that response, that buoys me to even, I think, greater sharpness and heights. It's a reciprocal thing, really. I mean, I think most performing artists will tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good. And so McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. Like he says, human sensorium. Knife and fork extend our teeth. Clothing extends our skin. Like even non-tangible religion or consciousness, it might extend religion or philosophy might extend consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether it's a pen or a keyboard, what humanness does it extend?
It extends my brain, and I'm a Sharpie, thin Sharpie guy.
Thin Sharpie, yes.
And a journal. I mean, that's where all my work begins.
Yeah. I talked to Michael Apted, the filmmaker, 40 years ago. I says, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? And most people don't know rapid montage was invented by Abel Gance in 1922 in France, but in 1980s, it started to flourish because of MTV to the point where Marty Scorsese cut his films faster because of MTV. So Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. And I asked this question with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I think we're brainwashed to believe we can.
Yeah.
That's my first thought. I could, I would have to give that some more thought. I mean, I think that fast cutting is appropriate with certain kinds of storytelling in film, and not so appropriate with other kinds of films. I mean, for instance, the Bourne films are all like very fast cut, and it works
Yeah.
in that context. But I don't think it like would work so well if with other stories that other story forms.
But really, Oliver, the hidden question is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
It's possible, but how effective they are in completing their tasks, that's another question.
Yeah. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Um, Compromise. Because you got to work with other people. You got to be able to play well with others in this world if something is going to happen, with very few exceptions.
Dude,
There's an egolessness involved with compromise, and conviction just can lead to, let's say, you're wrong.
there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right, Oliver.
Okay.
You know,
Not to say that I always play well with others,
no, but you'd be amazed. It's 80% people say conviction. It's like it's I don't know. I mean, I ask all these questions and I want them to be answered a certain way in a way, but I want people to feed me things that I would never think too. But it's amazing how I love it when somebody says compromise, because it's already like we're already convicted to things, but Anyways, it's like this one. This question changed over the years. Now I ask it this way. Rate these three elements in your accomplishments. You've accomplished a lot. Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Um, I would say that order.
Yeah.
Skill and ambition.
Yeah.
Luck.
And then do you think your observations of humans in general, is ambition based more on fear or joy?
Oh, fear.
Yeah. So that's how, how I used to ask it was, is ambition based more on fear or joy? And everybody would say fear. And then I read Friedkin, who directed The Exorcist, and he said, in Hollywood, skill and luck have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition.
I'm not saying that I'm not ambitious, you know.
Yeah.
Of
But I
course,
mean, it is a funny thing because some people go, well, it's not necessarily those three choices. One friend says you left out necessity. And then there's other, just because I suggest the three doesn't mean there's not other ones.
sure. And I would say that these are all pretty like close runners in the race there, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
and I guess with luck, I think when I hear the word luck, I think more. I'm really a big, how should I say, adherent of synchronicity.
Yeah.
The art of meaningful coincidence,
Yeah.
and so many things that have propelled my various journeys have had to do with just strange coincidences of people I met at the right time in the right place that just a door opened for one reason or another. And that, I guess that's where that always invariably leads to more fun. That really all I want to do is have fun. That's my MO.
That is totally me too. I love
If,
it.
if it
That's
ain't, if it ain't going to be fun, forget about it.
forget about it. And that's what amazes me about your book on Lord Buckley. These last 3 pages of acknowledgments, you tell almost every story how you met this person and Kurt Silsby, who I asked all these same questions. You go, Kurt, you the man,
Well, he
one of
was.
my
He
greatest champions. And when I asked him, it was funny because I interviewed him in a coffee house probably 15 years ago. And after one of the questions, I just went to the next question. He goes, aren't you going to follow up on that question? Like he was like slapping me up going, you got to improve. But you walk us through maybe, Oliver, just briefly, who did you, it's like Dylan, Dead, and Lord Buckley. I mean, you really touched three of my biggies. And what came first of the three? And then where did you go? Well, I'm going to do a book, just sort of briefly tell us the history of those
oh
three
boy,
books.
I'll try to do it briefly.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose Dylan, was sort of was part of the soundtrack of my life even before I was an admirer of him, just from being a young person growing up in the 1960s. Times
Yeah.
they are changing. Mr. Tambourine Man. These were all Blowing in the Wind, of course. I mean, these were all like they played them at summer camp. They, you heard them.
Yeah.
You heard the songs on the radio. You go to people's houses. Even their, even the parents sometimes had the Dylan record. So it was.
Yeah.
He was, and the music was around. I'm not even sure that I knew Bob Dylan was a person until like I was 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
I didn't, was like, is it, what is that, a band, Dylan? And it didn't really compute. And as I say, it was, a sports guy for most of my childhood. And then around like 10th, 11th grade, smoking weed, of course, that began, you hanging out with different kinds of folks and like, there was always like the cool older sister or the cool older brother who was like,
Yeah.
check this out, check that out. There was also a summer where I was a camp counselor at the summer camp I went to for many years in central Vermont. And someone had an 8-track of Working Man's Dead, and Uncle John's Band was sort of the gateway song to them. Uh,
Amazing.
my sister was actually much, the hipper music person growing up. My younger sister, I mean, she had Dead records and Dylan records, and Joni Mitchell and Laura Nyro, and early Elton John and whatnots. Leonard Cohen, of course. So I was, Mose Allison. So I was hearing a lot of stuff, from her. My parents, my parents are more. My mother's not a music person hardly at all, except for opera. My father was more like the classical music guy. He had some jazz records, like a Louis Armstrong WC handy record, but none of this was kind of filtering in. And then 11th, 12th grade, I kind of my hippie friends in high school, were really getting into jazz, and I went to high school right down the street from the Village Vanguard. So I've been liking to say recently, there was the night before I saw Pharoah Sanders play, and the night after I heard Pharoah Sanders play, and that was sort of, it was almost like a really, like, that particular experience, being 10 feet away from this master musician, just blowing his brains out with this incredible band, and Leon Thomas doing his soulful scat singing thing, and it just, all the walls of reality and art, and I can't even begin to put it into words, like how life changing that night was.
Well, Oliver, let me interrupt for 1 second,
Yeah.
because that's like in Pamela DeBar's book. She says pre-Beefheart and post-Beefheart,
Yeah.
and it's like pre-Pharoah. I saw Pharoah at Baker's Keyboard Lounge in Detroit, and it hit me the same way you did. I mean, it's undescribable. And I'm riding my bike in Marina del Rey one day, and Pharaoh's walking with his daughter along the path. And I just stop and I go, "Are you Pharoah Sanders?" And he's like, "Yes." I says, "Dude, you changed my life. Your music is transcendent." And, I just laid it on. And his daughter, you could tell, went, "Wow." She really appreciated that someone was saying this to her dad, and, all praise to Pharoah, because he just passed away. But that was so cool. Pre-Pharoah and post-Pharoah.
Yeah, it could have been it could have been any night at the Vanguard, because over the next few years, we saw Rahsaan Roland Kirk, we saw Elvin Jones, we saw Bill Evans, we saw Mingus, we saw Sonny Rollins. I mean, on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And my other peers were going to the Academy of Music, and seeing the rock and roll bands of the era. I mean, I checked out the New Riders and Waylon Jennings and those groups as well. And there was certainly all kinds of music available in New York, then and now, as always. But it was just the intimacy of the jazz scene, and the doors of expression that were open there. Of course, I was getting into the Beats then, and and Joyce and Faulkner, as I mentioned. So like the arts just became so alive for me. And of course, Lenny Bruce and Lord Buckley began to be kind of part of that smorgasbord, if you will.
Yeah.
And it was actually the father of a good friend, a family who I'm still very, very tight with, who saw that I was both kind of a literary nut and a jazz freak, and sat me down and said, "Hey, have you ever heard of Lord Buckley? I have this album. You should listen to this." And so he played the Naz and I think Jonah and the Whale for me. And I can't say I was really understanding what Buckley was saying at the time, because it was so rich and dense in languages. Is this like a black guy talking? And the slang was so obscure. But I knew that there was something special and mysterious that I wanted to hear more of. But it wasn't like I sold all my earthly goods and chattels and started following the Buckley muse right then and there. It was, I bought the record at some point. I bought another record at another point. It just was sort of part of the menu that I was taking in. And I suppose as I read the liner notes to some of these records, so here's a rare one right here.
Yes. Oh yeah.
and you'd read the liner notes on the back, and it painted a portrait of this really, I know the word is not a cool word to use anymore, like exotic American subterranean figure. Like, who is this? What is this? And I began to really feel this guy was just a kind of unacknowledged genius over the years, and I wanted to find out more.
Yeah.
It was curious, and information was not easy to come by.
Yeah.
Um, so looping actually back to my dad, I would do some research. I would often do research for him at the main branch of the New York Public Library on 42nd Street there. And while I was going through various microfilm stuff for him, I guess a couple of Buckley albums had been recently re-released, and so I found, my father's time. I found Buckley's obit. I found an article from Life magazine. I found a few other thises and that's. And I remember sitting there in the main reading room. And if you've ever been in that amazing space, there's three. The room is like 2 stories high, and there's these big windows, and it was like the light was coming in the afternoon, and I was basking in this golden glow, and I just kind of had a vision that this book had to be written, and I was the person that was going to just devote my life to doing it.
Yeah.
So I went home, I made a list of all kinds of people who I thought might be connected to him in some way, and I began to try to track them down like an investigative reporter would, and interview them. And you know how it is, like one person leads to 2 other people, those 2 other people lead to 5 other people, and so on and so forth. And began to build up. Those people would then send me articles or send me recordings, often on unreleased recordings. So this archive of material to begin to construct a book around just evolved and emerged. And the research and the reporting and the interviews, that was the easy fun part. The getting it published thing, that was
yeah,
that's a whole other kettle of fish, because his profile was and remains so under the radar. Like, publishers were just very reluctant to take the bait.
Yeah. But it is amazing, and it's such a great book. And then after the Buckley book, then the Dead and the Dylan books came after?
No, I got I started actually working on, they were all kind of concurrent and overlapping. I started working on the Buckley book first. That would have been in the very early 90s. I worked in publishing. This was all done against the backdrop of, working I worked for a company called Facts on File.
Yeah.
It's a research-oriented, reference-oriented publishing company, and I was the managing editor of a publication called Editorials on File that reprinted editorials from the daily major newspapers about the top events, global news events. So, I had a full-time job, raising a family, and doing these side projects. So the Buckley project started like 90, 91. And someone pitched, I did an article about the Dead for Entertainment Weekly that led to putting together a book proposal. I worked on that for probably a couple of years. I had the knowledge, it was and the archive, so it was kind of like an organizational thing just as much as it was like a writing thing. And the success of that allowed me to get the contract for the Dylan book. Cool. So they were all kind of all these projects were sort of informing and segueing into one another.
Such a great crossover, the 3 too, and how they touched me. It leads to this question, Oliver. 2 of my film heroes say, ignore yourself. Jonas Mika says, there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle, and this stuff just comes through me. I know it's a stupid question. I know it's both, and it depends, but your thoughts in general. Is art making more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology, cultures, and environments are dominant?
I've experienced both.
Yeah.
So I really can't, it's not an either or thing in my mind. I mean, um, my I my books, I don't really see them as I I see them in a minor way as a form of self-expression, but they're not art, whereas my theatrical performance film writing, I feel is, it's more of an art and a craft. And yeah, I feel like I am expressing myself, but I also feel that I am a conduit for something larger than myself, that I can't really, I'm loath to kind of put my finger on, it's kind of a Mercury.
Mercury is a great word. And you brought up this word because the hidden question to this question really is, can art making be egoless?
Can be egoless. Um, at times, yeah. At
Yeah, it's
times it's like at times it's like the supreme act of egotism.
yeah, it's amazing because
I
for
mean,
years,
these are all paradoxes
yeah,
ultimately, and
yeah,
I think to ponder and even try to resolve them is just like a fool's errand.
yeah. Well, it's funny because most people, when I say, can art be egoless, they go, no. And about a year ago, a woman said, great art is egoless. And then about a month ago, another woman said, it has to be egoless. So, it is paradoxical, and it's not that I'm trying to make people say it's more this or more that, even though my favorite was when a woman said, the word more doesn't function in your question.
Yeah.
Because, I'm just trying to jump off to talk about this stuff. The
I
poet
guess
said,
I guess what I'm thinking is like, I mean, this is all really from the context of my performing, because
yeah,
when you're on stage with especially with the Buckley canon specifically, um, I mean, this is something that I care about.
yeah,
As it's a message of, or
yeah,
messages that I want to get forth to an audience.
yeah,
So to get up on stage, like even anybody gets up on stage for any reason, whether it be an artist, a performing artist, or a politician. And I think we've seen the form of performance art in the last few years that maybe we could do without. um you're saying that this is important, people, listen to me. I mean,
hello.
on some basic level, that's what you're saying. On the
Yeah,
other hand, there's a kind of a sacrifice and like a selfless sharing, because you care about it, you want to give it to other people too. So uh, uh, on its and my own terms.
yeah.
So
Well, I
these are
like,
all these are all impulses that conflict and complement one another.
yes. I like the word compulsion. Is that a word that you would say? Your compulsion. It's a compulsion, or, I know it's hard to divvy out a word, but
Yeah, that would be a word.
yeah,
Yeah, well, like, and yeah, and you're compelled. I'm compelled, I'll keep on doing whatever I'm doing, whether it's performing or drawing baseball pictures or whatever the hell. When it stops being fun, I'm going to stop doing it, move on to something else. As long as it's fun, I'm going to keep on doing it. People dig
yeah,
it. Why not?
yeah,
I mean, we're
yeah,
kind of here to make each other to, enjoy one another.
yeah,
Uh,
totally agree. Ben Ratliff is a music writer, and he says, I mean sound as it is long functioned among jazz players, as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So, like me and you could hear Miles and go, oh, that's Miles,
totally.
or hear Jerry Garcia and go, oh, that's Jerry. So he said, Ben said, Miles is fragile and pointed. So he uses two words. Coltrane is slightly undercooked and urgent. For your creativeness, you're doing Buckley on stage. What two words would you like to hear a music or a theater critic describe Oliver, doing your theatrical Lord Buckley? What two adjectives would you be honored that would sort of sum up your sound? You know what I'm saying? That
Sure. Musical joy.
Yeah, musical joy. See, so what is the function of music?
Oh man. Um, I guess, it sounds maybe a little corny, but on some level to uplift.
Yeah, that's not corny. That's good. Yeah. Well, Cage said, his teacher told him to soothe the soul and make it susceptible for divine intervention, which is to uplift. My friend says the three T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. You can learn the theory, you can learn the technique. How does one acquire taste?
Repeated listening.
Yeah.
I mean, you can enjoy, pick anything. Let's just, just say you mentioned Coltrane before, my favorite things. Let's just cut to that chase. Now you can hear it once, know nothing about Coltrane, know nothing about jazz, and really embrace it. Maybe that's the only time you'll ever hear it. But you listen to, that Atlantic cut 100 times, it gets better every time.
It
Or it
does.
gets more interesting every time, or you
Yeah.
hear something new in it every time.
Yeah.
So I would say the repeated listening is key to that answering that question.
Yeah. It's just like repeated listening of Lord Buckley or repeated readings of Joyce. It's amazing what you talked about. And on this regard to taste, McLuhan says that song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment?
I would say that's less and less true
Yeah.
as music and the internet become just a more ubiquitous, global, malleable, interchangeable, evolving thing. I mean, if you told me 20 years ago that I'd become a big fan of, Tuvan throat singing, I would have said, "What the fuck is Tuvan throat singing?"
Jesus. Yeah,
But now that's one of my go-tos.
that is funny because that is you really we operate on this other level, Oliver, because that's the actual example I give in describing this statement by McLuhan, because the Truva throat singers who Zappa had him over to his house, Richard Feynman brought him to
Sure,
America.
that's how I got turned on to them,
Yeah, Richard Feynman had him on the Johnny Carson Tonight Show, and he had him in the Rose Bowl parade one year.
Really? And then I didn't hear about that gig, but that's
And
good
these
one.
guys, and we went and saw him, and these guys are like, you're tripping out listening to this. And they sing about three things: their boots, snow, and the horses. And we're like, this music's way beyond that. But it is amazing what they communicate and not knowing the words in their songs. books.
Well, that's my point is that you don't have to know a whole lot about, boots, snow and horses, to feel the heart and soul of their specific particular form of human expression, and for it to hit the heart and soul in like a very, very deep ways. So I don't think I don't speak and I doubt I'm ever going to learn any Tuvan, but their music, hits me. And I've just used them as an example because
Yeah.
they're particularly peculiar.
Well, the other one is the Bulgarian Women's Choir
Oh yeah, yeah.
when they charted on the English pop charts, it was like, whoa.
My wife and I went to see them perform when they first began to, emerge as a kind of a global phenom.
That's amazing. Well, what's more fundamental, music or language?
I guess it depends what you mean by fundamental. When we can't live without either, I suppose language is more fundamental because, it's more direct in terms of survival, shall we say.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're hungry and you're coming across and you have no food and you come to somebody who has food, it's easier to say, do you have any food that you can share with me, as
Yeah.
opposed to singing them a tune that won't get you that won't get the burger in your belly, but
A burger in your belly. It's funny because I heard this writer on the radio once, and she said her mom was raised in the Caribbean and she never read books. And she said, and then she grew up and wrote books. And she said, but my mom knew what to do when a tsunami hit because the songs she sang as a kid told her.
well, I was going to say that, isn't music just another language,
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh.
An instrumental that makes me laugh. You ever heard of the bluegrass fiddler? His name was Scotty Stoneman.
Tell me.
He played with the Kentucky Colonels. They were like, what's his name? Clarence White was in that band, and the Stoneman family was a venerable musical family, I think from West Virginia, one of those dark hollers, And Scotty Stoneman, he could get really any sound out of the fiddle. So he had this one cut where he does all these bird sounds,
Wow.
where the whippoorwill and
Oh, you're spelling his last name Stowman?
Stoneman, Stoneman, Scott Stoneman or Scotty Stoneman.
Scott Stoneman. Oh man, I'm gonna look that up because that question doesn't get okay. We got about 15 more minutes. This has been super fun, Oliver.
Yeah, I'm having a blast.
Yeah. Utah Phillips says anarchy is making rules for yourself and not others. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Nobody.
All right. I love that.
Not to say that there shouldn't be rules.
Right.
But I think maybe if we can, small d democracy, come up with ones that are fair for as many people as possible,
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose, maybe like a more direct answer, sensible answer perhaps would be, our elected officials, but I'm not sure we can trust them.
Yeah. I mean, it's endless. What to do about what these situations we're in. I mean,
well, Lenny Bruce was a whole thing about, look at how the whole setup is, but it's sort of like this anarchist thought experiment he has. So you have a group of people and like they say, okay, there's no pooping in the room, but someone poops in the room. What are you going to do? Like, how do you deal with the person who's pooping in the room?
Yeah.
has the authority to like bring whatever consequence to that person and their actions, and it's, there's always going to be people who are unhappy or do stuff that, the group disapproves of. But no, I guess the answer is like no one person should have,
Yeah.
authority.
I love what Lenny says about you can call police officers three things: cops, pigs, or peace officers. So it's like, why don't we just call them peace officers? Because we become what we behold, you know? And so I want to put out like the thing with cameras on cops. It's like, yeah, everybody wants to have cameras on cops, but why do you need a camera to dictate what a cop should be doing, treating other humans humanely?
Right.
We want to raise a society where people treat each other humanely because that's the humane thing to do.
Sure. I mean, even the words, just think of the words like policing and
Yeah.
law enforcement.
Yeah.
It's the same job, but the intent is kind of, or philosophy behind or embedded in those words are really very different from one another.
Yeah. Well, you've been involved in language, and this is important to me. Tell me one major element that's remained the same and one major element that's changed in your pursuit of communication, through books and through theater.
Wow. I would say the thing that has ask the question one more time.
One major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed in, just say, your creativeness.
My personal creativeness or just society as a whole?
No, your personal creativeness.
Okay. I think the thing that stayed the same is rhythm,
Yeah.
and alliteration that's kind of connected with that. And the thing that's changed, I don't know if this really changed, but I never could write dialogue when I was younger, and now I can.
Yeah.
I know that's a direct, that's not the best answer to that question, but
Yeah.
and
But
it's the dialogue thing. It's funny. I had a great friend, one of my dearest friends. He got killed in the stupidest way, hang gliding.
wow.
And he was not cut out for hang gliding, let's put it like that. And this guy could like tell fantastic stories and like bring everybody, the characters in his stories to life. And it was not long after he died that I began to like find a groove with writing dialogue. And I couldn't help
Wow.
but think that his spirit gifted that to me in some way.
Yeah. That's like Paul Krasner said, I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives. But actually, Hollis Frampton nails it in what you just said. He said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
Well, it is on my list of things to do. So I guess the answer is no.
That's good. I had a list of things to do today, but I lost the list, so I had the day off.
Okay.
And then I started a new list for tomorrow, and the first thing I put on it was find old lists.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's not. I'm not looking forward to it, but it's not something that I'm particularly freaked out about either.
Yeah.
I don't dwell on it, And I mean, I've been saying lately, I'm going to be dead before I know it. So, like, why not just like pull out all the stops while while they're going is good.
That's it. Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Well, first of all, Lewis Carroll and I share a birthday together, I should tell you that.
Nice. What is it?
January 27th.
Oh, how cool.
Uh, does coffee count as breakfast?
Yes.
Well, then, no, I have not had any no visions, no nothing before breakfast ever.
But check this out. You'll love it. Sun Ra got in the New Yorker recently. And I was like, Sun Ra and the New Yorker, something's good. Something's good's happened in the world. And they quoted him saying, the impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change. So,
Well, you're talking to one of Sun Ra's greatest fans and admirers. In fact, on if you see pictures of me on stage, there's this red scarf I wear.
yeah.
Red scarf used to belong to John Gilmore, who
Oh,
was
wow.
who was Sun Ra's tenor man and who was like really one
He's,
of my great heroes. I'm sorry, but what's the
he's,
question?
he's the Godhead. No, I mean, no, it was just, we are talking about impossible, and I just was telling you that Sun Ra's, yeah, no, I'm Gilmore is like pre-train. I mean, he sort of
Yeah.
changed train.
Well, that's a
Nice.
story that Coltrane saw the orchestra play and came running down to the stage and was just, John Gilmore, you got the concept,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you can definitely hear like there's kind of a before and after like Coltrane Sun Ra moment. I saw the orchestra, oh Jesus, 15 times maybe over the course from the mid 70s to the right before Sun Ra died. They were the band for me.
no, I totally agree. I'm there 100%. And we were lucky, he was playing and showing Super 8 films on his cape. And, this was like beyond the beyond. And it really is cool how Afrofuturism has allowed new generations to learn Sun Ra. It's
Absolutely.
quite amazing.
I mean, I model, some of my performance actually after the orchestra, what the orchestra does, because there's both the very, um, on point presentation that they do, and then there's this kind of rambling, shambling, funky DIY, make it up as you go along thing that I think is very attractive and endearing to some performance contexts.
It's amazing how he liberated us so much. So there's a line that goes, Oliver, you create what you resist. And I'm not saying you, like Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated in the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So just your thoughts on this line, you create what you resist, or one creates what one resists. Any thoughts?
I would say that there's like a lot of truth in that. I mean, again, I don't want to make it this be about the Oliver Trager performance show, but in that, Lord Buckley's most famous bit is arguably the Naz, his monologue celebrating three miracles in the life of Jesus Christ. Now, as my father called himself a born again atheist, I like to call myself a born again agnostic. but the point is that Jesus isn't a subject or a figure, or Christianity isn't an ideology that I'm particularly drawn to.
Yeah.
It scares me, for the
Yeah.
most part. And as a Jew, good reason. There's not the best history there. On the other hand, there I am up on stage spreading the word of the gospel.
Yeah.
So if that answers your question, yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yep. How do you find?
Maybe it's a way to make it not so scary for me.
Yeah, that's it. How do you find peace of mind?
walking.
Oh, I love that.
And I would add being in touch with the phases of the moon.
Nice.
Whenever I'm feeling a little bit like off, I realize, oh yeah, I'm not connected to what phase of the moon it is, and I kind of think about it for a moment. When was the last time I saw it? Oh yeah, it must be waxing, waning now, or whatever, and that grounds me. But walking is my go-to every day. I walk a few miles every day. It keeps the mojo going.
Really nice. And you anticipate the next question. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Well, I was a mess when I was 12. Uh, so I'd probably give that 12-year-old a bit of a hug and say, "Don't worry, you're gonna screw up a lot of times, but you're gonna do more good than bad. You're gonna do some bad too, but you're gonna do more good."
It's good. These are 5 Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head in a few words. First one, who started it all?
Um, Abraham,
Are we going to make it?
of course,
Where do we put it?
on the top shelf.
Who's cleaning it up?
Probably me.
Is it serious?
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful. Couple more and we're out of here, Oliver. What a pleasure. Should toilet paper come off the roll over or under?
Um, um, can it come off over and folded?
Yes, it can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Wrong place, wrong time.
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Spruce.
Lenny Spruce. You ever see that?
No.
You ever see? Oh,
What is
there's a Beanie and Cecil cartoon that Lord Buckley did the soundtrack to.
Yeah, sure. Like, they say Lenny Spruce in that?
Yeah, they go Lenny Spruce.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. The wild man from Wildsville episode.
that's
Yeah, of course.
my friends.
Yeah, Bob
Bob
Clancy,
Clancy.
right? He was
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
I loved
Rob
Beanie and Cecil when I was a kid, and it was a joy to discover that Buckley
did a
connection.
Beanie and Cecil. Isn't that amazing?
That was probably my first exposure to Lord Buckley. Actually, now that you think about it,
Yeah,
think about
probably
it.
me too, and we didn't know.
Yeah.
If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed, and what would it be made of?
I would want it displayed in Monument Park at Yankee Stadium, and I want it made out of soap.
Nice. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good that I never had and I never wanted. Crepe Suzette.
Nice. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Gag.
No, I like the laugh before you said gag. The laugh was good. What's the cultural
That's a
shift?
strange question, but okay.
No, it is. No, well, the guy I got to tell you the history of that guy. I learned that from. He used to hang out with Billie Holiday and Mingus in New York, and he was an altacocker on the Venice Boardwalk. He was an old guy. He knew all the old New York scene, but he's just a wise person, and it was like he told me that question. He says it's like a metaphor for life. In fact, you being a literature person, a woman on Venice Boardwalk answered it once. She goes, I'd take that bag of shit coming at my head and I'd use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit. I said, that's Descend the Maelstrom by Edgar Allan Poe, the short story where he studies the patterns of the boat, smushed by the whirlpool, and he uses them to swoop his way out instead of going down and drowned in the ocean.
I was getting more of a 11th ring of the Inferno.
Yeah, you mean
Question,
Dante?
right? Yeah.
Yeah, Dante. Yeah, that's it. And that's what actually McLuhan said in his first book, is that we're swimming in information overload. And that was like in the late 50s, he wrote that. Now we're even swimming in more information overload. And we can technique that advertisers use and use them to educate people. It's not like they have this secret pattern. They're just using symbolist poetry to persuade people. So why can't we do that?
Well, it is a battle of narratives, and narratives involve symbols, and symbols run very, very deep, as Jung told us.
Yeah. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Young voters.
Yeah. Totally agree. Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Oliver, you've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
I would say truth.
Wow.
But I would add the caveat that I'm not always the best truth teller.
Yeah.
In fact, there have been times in my life where I really regret not being more upfront and upper with how I truly felt or saw things.
Yeah.
With those close to me.
But this begs two tangent questions, if you don't mind. I'll go to the Marcel Proust question. On what occasion do you lie?
It would really be two, and I think it's pretty common: to protect myself or protect others.
Yeah. Tom Waits said, on what occasion?
The protecting myself part of it would go along with shame I might feel for certain actions and behaviors.
Yeah. When they asked Waits, on what occasion do you lie? Tom Waits said, I didn't know I needed an occasion. But the other one is Louis Buñuel said, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it.
Well,
Now,
I would never claim that.
Well, that one, 90% of people go, oh, I agree with that. And one guy finally said, that's bullshit. If I'm going to seek something, it's because I want to find it and think I'm going to find it. And so if I morphed it into this question, if the journey is more important than the destination, then why do we have to name a destination or seek a destination?
Well, I guess my first thought kind of goes back to this. We were talking about art functioning as an ordering of chaos. So the destination functions as a form of order. It
functions as a form of order, yeah.
I drove cross country this past summer, man, and I had a destination, but man, the journey was amazing. I hadn't done that in years. Should make your way to Rugby, North Dakota sometime. See how the other half lives.
Dude, we did that. My wife and I did that twice. 2 round trips, and I hitchhiked it twice in the late 70s. It is an amazing trip. We're lucky. And what you said about Jack Kerouac, and that someone documented it too and sort of set up. But back to the destination thing, there are these people who changed the world forever. In Paris in the 20s, they were called flaneurs, and they were basically slackers who sat at coffee houses and drank coffee and then changed the world with their art, because they were doing what is called psychogeography. You just wander aimlessly and you might have epiphanies in everydayness.
Well, doesn't it happen to everybody?
We hope. That's what Joyce was all about, epiphanies and everydayness. I mean, if you can do that.
Well, there was that great line in in Ulysses where Stephen Dedalus is having debate with, I think, his teacher, and there's I forget how it's the setup, but it's like the sound of God, those children laughing in the street.
Yeah. That's also in Finnegan's Wake. They said, who wrote this book, or how'd you do this? He goes, I didn't write it. The people sitting over there at the cafe wrote it. It was just like Joyce listened to shortwave radio in Paris and wrote it all down.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What's your favorite cinematic expression of James Joyce's work?
You mean where they actually made, you mean there's two ways to approach that. You mean that a film that evokes, I'll take Finnegan's Wake or example. You mean a film that evokes Ulysses or The Wake, or any Joyce, or a film that is a remake of or uses the book?
Yeah, an adaptation of some
An adaptation. Well, I mean, I'm more a Wake person. I'm in a Ulysses reading group, and I'm realizing, Ulysses. But, Joseph Strick's movie on Ulysses is pretty good. I think the one
Milo O'Shea, or
I'm not sure if Milo's in it. It sounds like it is. But I would say, the one you're supposed to say in the Joyce world would be The Dead by John Huston.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. But I would just say Mary Ellen Butte's passages from Finnegan's Wake. You can't make a movie of Finnegan's Wake, but this woman invented abstract electronic animation. I mean, literally, this woman is an amazing filmmaker from Texas. And then she says, well, now I'm going to make a feature film. And they go, oh, and what? And they go, Finnegan's Wake. And she actually made a film. You can watch it on YouTube free. And it played at the Cannes Film Festival. And it really is an amazing account of Finnegan's Wake.
I'm not aware of her or her film. There's the one I was going to, that I favor, who was also made by a woman. I'm forgetting her name. Fiona Flanagan or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's called James Joyce's Women.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Takes scenes from his work and his life and kind of intersperses them. And there's some sections from The Wake. And I don't know if it's for, a good introduction to Joyce, but it's the one that sings to me.
No, I appreciate it, Oliver, because I'll tell you another great clip is the Pogues lead singer, Shane MacGowan.
He died recently, right?
No, I don't think so. They just made this, Julian Temple made a documentary on him called Crock of Gold. And it's really a good doc. And in the middle of the doc, they show that 16 millimeter footage of James Joyce, in the way he works it into the storytelling, on how this kid is just a typical, you go to the bar, you get drunk, and you tell stories. That's what Irish are all about. That's why Joyce is the great writer he is, because this is storytelling through, bar,
the Gab, the Blarney, all of that.
The hootenanny bar singing, is this a private fight or can anyone join in?
Right. There's a great one thing I've been wanting to do for a while. I don't want to keep you, but there's, I forget what the section is called in Ulysses, um, where he's at in the bar. Is it the Cyclops scene?
Could
And
be, yeah.
but there's a fantastic Richard Pryor bit called Hank's Place.
Yeah.
And he does the same thing where he just brings all the characters in this bar to life in a little scenario of sorts. And I thought, wow, it would be so great to compare
Yeah.
these two geniuses who you don't really necessarily associate with one another, yet
Yeah.
they're picking, a very similar, a similar trope, the same trope,
Yeah.
and doing very different things with it, yet bringing like the culture of these places to life in such a vibrant and insightful, sensitive, compassionate way.
Totally. And that just got put up on YouTube within the last year is Anthony Burgess did a 30-minute like little talk about Finnegan's Wake in a bar. And you can just Google it and find it. It's amazing because it's similar. And Burgess wrote 8 books on James Joyce. And he
Really?
was
I know
a
he's a scholar for sure. That I
yeah,
knew.
he was a musician too. He was a music composer. And in fact, I have this new question about music that I haven't incorporated too much. No, actually, I just found it. Here it is. Anthony Burgess says, we must now ask some very different questions about the relationship between music and life. And I love that it's so simple what he's saying. We must ask some very different questions. So before I ask the last question, I'll ask you this one. What question remains unresolved for you?
Hmm. Um, okay, I'm just making this up as I go along, but how about this? What exactly is love?
Yeah, that's really good. You know who asked that another way? Frank Zappa said, what's beyond love?
Okay, yeah,
Because we're big fans of Eden Abe or Eden Abez, the
yeah,
guy.
sure. Nature
He's
Boy.
he wrote Nature Boy, and he was homeless in Venice, and
Yeah,
it's like,
living under the Hollywood sign, wasn't he, for a
yeah,
while?
well, he lived there too. I mean, but when people want to get rid of homeless people in my hometown, Venice, it's like, you better be careful. You might be kicking out a guy who wrote the greatest love song in the world, because basic line is, the greatest lesson you'll ever learn is to love and be loved in return.
Mhm.
And that's pretty amazing. But, what was yours? What did you say about love again?
What exactly is love?
What is love? Yeah, that is an amazing thing. Yeah.
I mean, we feel it, we
Yep.
experience it, and we try to define it exactly, but it's not. Its essence is very, again, mercurial,
Yeah.
opaque, slippery kind of thing.
Well, that's what we did when we invented words. We wrecked everything. I mean, we didn't wreck things, we changed it, because nothing exists as it is. Everything's in flux constantly. So when you go, oh, this is love, or this is a computer, then we're trying to nail things down.
You reduce it, but but love is something that doesn't seem that it's possible
Yeah.
to reduce,
Yeah.
and therefore actually define. You experience it, but
Yeah.
it's not. You feel it. You know it when you feel it.
Yeah.
And then, like, where does that bleed into lust?
Yeah. Hello. So here's the last question. What gives you the most optimism?
Dawn.
Oh, what a great answer. I never have gotten that. Oliver, this has been a treat for me, really enlightening. And I'll tell you, the first question is, what is the best thing for a human being? I got from Wilhelm Reich, and he said the best thing for a human being is another human being.
Uh-huh.
And the last question is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. They said, what gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people.
There you go.
No, and it's like spending this time with another person has been so delightful and really taught me a lot.
Yeah,
And
the conversation went a lot of ways I didn't know what to expect, to be honest with you. And I feel like I kind of surprised myself with some of my answers. I actually I was talking about Wilhelm Reich and Rangeley, Maine earlier today with my
yeah,
sister. So it's all come full circle,
yeah,
synchronicity.
it's really psychic how it's come around. And I was like going to bring up Abby Hoffman.
And
Later,
I
you
mentioned
said
it, yeah.
Abby Hoffman. I mean, it was really cosmic, but I want to again thank you for all your research. I mean, this book right here is truly like a Bible for me. I mean, there's no one quite like Lord Buckley, and like you've helped enable people to realize this guy is so important. And I really thank you, and thank you for all this time together. And
Well, thank you for that comment. I would want to add that, I really couldn't, like, you mentioned the acknowledgments. I really couldn't have done it without this community of Buckley
yeah,
lovers that I, connected with, and, kind of help, engender this community. And I would put his daughter, his surviving child, Lori, really on top of that list, who's just a, fantastic person, and, has given me a pretty wide berth in terms of being able to, carry the torch and, spread a bit of the gospel. But really,
Lori's amazing. I've interviewed her with all these same questions also.
yeah. Oh, good. I'd like to see, I would love to check that out sometime.
Yeah.
And, we're going to do a performance then Beyond Baroque, right? Sometime.
Anytime, and keep me posted. You mean you want to book you at Beyond Baroque? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Give me a three.
Let's touch that base after the new year, maybe. And
Yeah. The best thing, Oliver, is send me 3 possible dates that you could possibly or want to do it, and then we go from there. And the sooner the better. They book up fast, but we could work something out. That would be super cool. I would love that. That would be
somewhat dependent on my main collaborator, a fellow named John Kruth, who's you may have met him before. I don't know. He lives in LA part of the year sometimes.
yeah.
So I've worked with a lot of people recently. I just did a show as part of the Kerouac Centennial in Lowell, and David Amram and his group backed me up. No rehearsal, seat of the pants. We just totally killed. But John and I are like very simpatico with one another, and always prefer to to work with with him when I get a chance. But I think more. But Jerry, thanks a lot for this. I had a really good time. These are questions I don't get asked every other day.
I think John is on scheduled to do this interview, but I got to tell you about David. I interviewed David with all these questions at his house, and the guy wouldn't stop talking. And then we had to go. And as we're walking to the car, he followed us, keep talking. And it's like one of my greatest moments in interviewing people for 40 years is like, no, I don't want you to leave. And we walked in and he was trying to put his pants on. I mean, David Amram is like a total American hero icon. Anybody who's jamming with Charles Mingus at 17, and Mingus goes, I want you in my band. He goes, I'm still in high school. And he goes, quit. I mean,
they kind of broke the mold with David. They're really,
that's it. He's just like,
I mean, after the show, I was toast, and we went back to the hotel, and he just wanted to hang out some more. It was like, I'm like, and he's just turned 92.
I know it. And he plays bebop on a penny whistle better than all the jazz guys who are jamming with him. He's like wailing, and it's like, this guy is unbelievable.
He was really the first person who I interviewed, I think, for the book, when I think about it, and has been a supporter and a cheerleader and collaborator over the years. I mean, even before I was doing the play and this solo version, I was doing annual Lord Buckley events in New York, inspired by some cats out here in California who were doing these annual events. And David and his group were like the house band basically every year. And, I mean, he's just one of many examples of people who just believed in me and said, let's do this. Let's have fun. Let's extend the trip in some grand fashion.
Well, that goes back to my question. Can you forget to die? It's evident Lord Buckley forgot to die. He's still alive. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Through people like you and in your book and your performances. And then thank God
Well, put it this way, people aren't doing Henny Youngman shows. Not that I don't love Henny Youngman, but I think you see where I'm
going. That's good.
Well, I'm not the only person who's done, Lord Buckley shows. There's been at least a dozen performers over the years who've done something really unique and special with the material. I mean, I don't do a recreation of his set. That's not my trip. I mean, I'm much more about, like, if my show is like, I have it in my head that it's more like if Buckley had lived another 10 years into like the Woodstock era, what would his show be like? As opposed to like some sort of Elvis impersonation, Beatlemania thing. It does not appeal to me at all. I mean, I'm glad for those people who do that bit with, they get dressed up in the tuxedo with the carnation and the pith helmet and all of that. That's great. I got no quarrel with that. But that's as a creative soul, that's not what draws me.
Yeah,
it's folk putty. It's meant to be reinvented, and
it is. That's see, what attracted me to Zappa is he was an alchemist, and he took two existing things, put them together, two known things, put them together, and created a third unknown thing. That's what Preston Sturges did. And it's actually a comment in that 15-minute version of the Buckley film that I get. This is really well put there. It's the old professor who says it.
Erwin Corey.
Yeah. No, not Erwin Corey, but I love Erwin Corey. I noticed that you brought up Erwin Corey, and it's like he is one of my other heroes. But basically what it is this is what I tell is, like, Frank took rock and theater and put it together, and let's say invented theatrical rock. Preston Sturges, the movie maker, sort of invented screwball comedy in a way. And so, but what they did is then they satirize their own new invention. They didn't just invent something, then they satirized their new invention.
Right. So it was like
so that's, I mean, Lord Buckley did that. And I saw those two guys who wrote one of the best Lenny Bruce books. And I says, what was Lenny's greatest influence is? And he said, strip clubs and Lord Buckley. So that's where Lenny Bruce came from. He took strip clubs and Lord Buckley, put them together, and came up with a new thing, which was he learned from Lord Buckley. You can tell me if this is what I'm saying is right. He learned from Lord Buckley to turn joke telling into storytelling.
Yes, because Buckley, I don't like to use the word comedian or stand-up. I mean, it doesn't really apply to him. Like gospel comedian, gospel storyteller. I mean, these are really more, that's more the idiom that he was working within, infused with some social commentary, of course, but he wasn't satirizing Jesus Christ when he did that, or Gandhi. He was reinventing their spirit.
What about
Zappa album?
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's super cool.
Let me ask you another question. How, because it's something, it's a quandary that I've been dealing with a little bit, which is how do you feel Buckley's use of the African American um, storytelling characteristics, idiom would fly in this cancel culture
I
that we live in now?
don't how you would hope it'd get him in trouble and it would enlighten some. It's just like Frank blackfaced himself on the cover of Joe's Garage, and
Yeah,
he sang a song called Nigger Business. Look at
sure.
this is all time-based, but it's also get over it. This is understanding how humans use words. They have services and disservices, and how you suss out the hidden psychic effects of how it shapes our behavior. So you don't, I mean, scolding or canceling people doesn't do anything.
I
You,
agree.
you can literally not turn something on or ignore it, or you can go, this is something that we need to talk about. I mean, Dick Gregory was great at it. He says, Mom, I named my book Nigger. Every time someone says it, they're advertising my book. And then, Yoko Ono can go, the woman is the nigger of the world, or in Patti Smith can go nigger, 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 nigger. But I mean, look at these are words. You try to learn how to be critical thinker and process how it's shaping our behavior. If you don't like it, then I know what you're talking about. But I would say what Buckley is a jazz shaman. That's how I usually pronounce
That's great. Yeah, I would definitely go along with that. Except
it. But
jazz.
I didn't mean to shift back, but I'm just
Yeah,
saying what you're talking about is such a huge thing. And we could do, a future salon in the future, a salon in the future, Oliver, where we have like 5 or 6 people here, and we could do one on Buckley, or we could do one on the dead, or one on Dylan, or one on cancel culture, whatever. So that's the other thing. This is a great forum.
yeah. I guess it boils down to like what is culture? Isn't all culture cultural appropriation? What's
Yeah,
misappropriation? Is there such a thing as misappropriation? Who's again, who's making the rules here?
who's making the rules? And of course, there's misappropriation, but if you have misappropriation, why did it happen? How do we deal with it is the important thing. It's not that you just kick someone out,
Right. I
it's
mean,
not.
my thing is as long as like it creates conversation,
Yeah.
dialogue, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
And then, people like, don't waste your time and empower them. It's like, well, that it goes back to that Alan Watts, which is very controversial. If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Well, if you don't acknowledge them, you empower them too.
Yeah.
So how much energy are you going to put into this? And say, the Me Too movement's huge, but Catherine Deneuve and a bunch of French women said a great line. They go, have you ever heard of an awkward come on? Like a man can do, well, oh my God, you did an awkward come on. You're canceled for the rest of your life. It's like, wait a minute. I blew it. How do you flip a breakdown into a breakthrough? How do you flip a rejection into a redirection?
Right. I guess it's like, get back to the Alan Watts question. It's like, how do you engage an enemy?
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I kind of loop back towards humor as a disarming, humanizing,
It,
um, uh, connective tissue that enables at least a dialogue of some sort.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
The kids.
I've only had a little bit of pushback over the years from what I do, but I guess I've just got a little bit more sensitive to it as these especially with stand up. You hear stories about the audiences literally attacking performers.
Oh, but that's like you just have now you got to have a bodyguard. I mean, come on. I mean,
I mean,
Zap,
I'm not saying that because I'm fearful in any way, but I'm just like, I just, all I'm saying is that people are wound kind of tight these days,
no,
you know, these subjects tend to be rather fraught and can quickly bring out the worst impulses. And you know, I, I just wanted to bounce it off your head, you know.
yeah, no, it's heavy. It's a heavy issue. Look at Zappa got pushed off the stage and injured for life because a guy thought Frank was making eyes at his girlfriend in the show. He wasn't even, attacked for some, song he wrote called Jewish Princess or something.
Yeah,
Literally, in the press, he was attacked, but he was physically attacked,
yeah, yeah.
and it's like, wait, you're an entertainer. You're not supposed to be physically attacked, are you? So that there's many issues there going on, like how they blackball someone out of their career and they also physically attack them. And what are we going to do about it? That's the big thing. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so
Well, Jerry, thanks again.
thank you.
That was a blast. We'll be in touch. And I'm getting hungry, so I gotta go.
Even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope it never ends and we'll keep talking forever and ever. Thank you so much,
Me
Oliver.
too. Have a great holiday.
You too, bro.